Hi. This last conversation was on the relationship between the spiritual and the physical, and how if we're in a very deep spiritual place, how does that affect the physical? Now, in Science of Mind, we talk a lot about how we have effect in our physical being, the creative power of the universe being within us, and how we use that creative force to create the life we want. In Buddhism, they talk about how it's really about letting go of the desires to create and have it all be about the more we let go, the less suffering we have, the more spiritual we are. One of the things that came up in this week's conversation is because a couple of weeks ago we'd actually defined spirituality as a sense of oneness, connectedness, peace. And the question is if you were in that space of wholeness, oneness, connectedness, and peace, would you actually care what was going on in the physical? Now, for me personally, I like having a creative life. And so if that means I have to deal with a little suffering, I'm okay with that because I like being co-creative in my life. But for Buddhists, that's not what it's about. And so it was a very rich conversation from the two sides. Dr. Gerald May, in his book Will and Spirit, talks about how you can't be doing both at the same moment. That if you're in a creative space, then you are the one creating. And if you are the one creating, then there is you and not you. And so that's a dualistic state. It is not a state of oneness. That when we are in a state of oneness, we don't exist. We disappear. The I disappears, and in such a place, we don't care about creativity. We're simply one with everything. This may have a lot to do with the fact that some of our greatest spiritual leaders have not done well physically, but have done wonderfully spiritually. For instance, there have been several Indian gurus who have died of cancer. The Buddha died of food poisoning. In terms of creating your life, Jesus got nailed to a cross and Gandhi was shot. And so, but these people do represent that sense of oneness for us, that high sense of spirituality. I have a couple of quotes for you from Stephen Levine, from his book, he has two books that I love. One's called Who Dies, and the other is 1 Year to Live. And so here they are. When we try to live where we can only, no, that's not it. It starts down here. That's my quote. Try to live where we can only visit. It can kill our self-esteem. That was something Dr. Gerald May pointed out that was very, very big for me personally. When we try to live where we can only visit, it can kill our self-esteem. Since we're only supposed to visit that place of oneness, if we try to live there and fail at it and fail at it and fail at it over years, it can actually hurt our self-esteem, make us feel like a failure because it's something we want. And so it occurred to me that this might be a failure to launch situation. We come from oneness, right? We come into this life from a place of oneness. And then we're in this dualistic physical world, and we go about creating our lives for the length of time we are in this finite physical environment, this dualistic physical environment. Through that time, we have much time to remind ourselves and experience oneness. In fact, according to Dr. Gerald May, it's a natural act that happens many times during the day. It lasts for a blink of an eye. And so through meditation and other things, we may get to experience it longer than a blink of an eye. But we have a consistent connection through our breath to that sense of oneness, but not to live there, just to remind us of home. like going home or visiting your parents, and then going about your lives. And for those who are struggling, for those who just want to be in oneness, and I was one of those for many, many years. It can feel like a failure when you think it's actually possible to live in a sense of oneness on a dualistic plane. You can visit a sense of oneness, but we're here to live in the dualistic plane, create life. Now that's my belief. Obviously the Buddhists believe differently. And Stephen Levine goes on to say, simply touching a difficult memory with some slight willingness to heal begins to soften the hold and intention around it. So it's just a sense of willingness, and that's what Dr. May refers to as the willingness to allow spirit. Healing can begin, so it affects the physical. If there is a single definition of healing, it is to enter with mercy and awareness those pains, mental and physical, from which we have withdrawn in judgment and dismay. And then quoting his son, Stephen goes on to say, once his son Noah, once you see what the heart really needs, it doesn't matter if you're going to live or die. The work is always the same. And so there's a statement in the physical doesn't matter if you're deep inside your heart and your spirituality. And so that was a big part of our conversation. Somebody had brought up the idea of pain and how we are a society that doesn't like to look at pain or be with pain or medicate ourselves, and that there's a way in which when we can be with our pain, then our physical is actually affecting our spirituality. Here, the first couple of the quotes here were really about how our spirituality affects the physical, but the physical can also affect the spiritual when we are willing to sit with that hurts instead of run from it, and that there is great healing in that. I have one more rather long quote from Mr. Levine that I want to read to you. It goes like this: when we recognize that just like the glass, our body is already broken, that indeed we are already dead, then life becomes precious. When we open to it just as it is, in the moment it is occurring. When we understand that all our loved ones are already dead, our children, our mates, our friends, how precious they become. How little fear can interpose, how little doubt can estrange us. When you live your life as though you're already dead, life takes on new meaning. Each moment becomes a whole lifetime, a universe unto itself. When we realize we are already dead, our priorities change, our heart opens, and our mind begins to clear of the fog of old holdings and pretendings. We watch all life in transit, and what matters becomes instantly apparent: the transmission of love, the letting go of obstacles to understanding, the relinquishment of our grasping, of our hiding from ourselves. Seeing the mercilessness of our self-strangulation, we begin to come gently into the light we share with all beings. If we take each teaching, each loss, each gain, each fear, each joy, as it arises and experience it fully, life becomes workable. We are no longer a victim of life. And then every experience, even the loss of our dearest one, becomes another opportunity for awakening. If our only spiritual practice were to live as though we were already dead, relating to all we met, to all we do, as though it were our final moments in the world, what time would there be for old games or falsehoods or posturing? If we lived our lives as though we were already dead, as though our children were already dead, how much time would there be for self-protection and the recreation of ancient mirages? Only love would be appropriate, only the truth. So I think what he means by already dead is, if this were our last moments on earth, The Native Americans have a saying, live with death on your shoulder. So in many customs, they talk about being present in the moment now, as if it were your last moment on earth. If this were your last moment on earth, what would you be doing? What would you say to the ones you love? Would you still be protecting yourself? I love his line, ancient mirages, because so many of the illusions we have fall away when you think this might be my last moment on earth. Only love would be appropriate. Only the truth. Live in that moment. Live as if this is your last. Say to the loved ones what you would say. I like the idea of imagining myself on my deathbed and looking back on my life and asking myself, am I proud of how I lived, how I spent my time on this planet? It keeps me on track. It keeps me making sure I am telling my loved ones I love them, that I make important what's really important, that I am serving love, nothing else. I ask you to do the same. Life is too precious to live otherwise. I look forward to talking with you again next week. Take care.